With the International Space Station starting to show wear and tear to indicate its age, we cannot help but think of what's next. Many astronauts and cosmonauts feel that NASA's dedication to keep ISS up for another couple of years is a risky one. For precisely 20 years now, the massive orbiting laboratory has been home to humans, a warm shelter from a hostile environment. But like the rest of us, the International Space Station is aging, and it can't stay in orbit on its own indefinitely. It needs a regular boost from visiting spacecraft. If those boosts stop or something else goes wrong, sooner or later, the lab will fail. For now, those flights to and from the International Space Station will continue through at least 2024. And because of the station's international nature, it's a partnership among the United States, Russia, Canada, Japan, and the participating nations of the European Space Agency. The decision to retire it will always be based on both engineering and politics. NASA officials say that while the ISS is currently approved to operate through at least December 2024 by the international partner governments, from a technical standpoint, we have cleared ISS to fly until the end of 2028. Additionally, our analysis has not identified any issues that would preclude us from extending beyond 2028 if needed, they added. But someday, the station's time will come. The facility is aging and at constant risk of impact from space debris and micrometeorites. If humans don't retire it, eventually the hazards of space will. The eventual fate of the space station has always been a haunting for NASA and Roscosmos, Russia's federal space agency. But as time has passed, it has loomed larger on the minds of space experts. Jonathan McDowell, an astrophysicist, argues that not much attention was given to the fate of ISS, but one major voice in changing that has been NASA's Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, a group that evaluates the safety measures NASA is taking in spaceflight. The panel has been raising concerns for at least a decade about how the space station will end, spurred by then upcoming retirement of NASA's space shuttle vehicles, which could have been used to deorbit the International Space Station. The group is still citing the issue regularly in its analysis of NASA policies. Scenarios for both a scheduled space station deorbit and a response if something goes very wrong are in the works. NASA confirmed, but are not yet public. NASA is actively working with the entire International Space Station partnership on plans to safely deorbit the space station at the end of its lifetime, NASA officials wrote in a statement. All told, space station construction required 42 separate launches. The facility would weigh over 900,000 pounds, 420,000 kilograms on Earth. It's nearly the length of a football field and boasts as much livable volume as a 6-bedroom house, according to NASA. That's much bigger than a lot of us expected. The station's demise didn't go completely unconsidered as the facility was being designed. Just a few years earlier, in 1979, NASA's Skylab station fell out of orbit. The agency had planned to guide the facility down to a controlled destruction in Earth's atmosphere using an early flight of the space shuttle. But that shuttle's launch was delayed, leaving the 80-ton Skylab stranded even as solar activity picked up, warmed and expanded Earth's atmosphere, and thereby accelerated the facility's doom. As a result, the spacecraft fell on its own and out of control, leaving no way for NASA to target the pieces over remote areas to slow the spacecraft's descent enough to reduce the size of those pieces. Instead, chunks of the station scattered across Australia, the largest of them a massive oxygen tank. The incident was a turning point in how people think about how large objects leave orbit. The risk if the space station does fall to Earth on its own is significant, McDowell argued. At about 400 tons, the space station is by far the heaviest human-made object ever to circle Earth. The larger an object is, the less likely the atmosphere is able to fully burn it up. And because of the space station's outstretched solar array, it's vulnerable to spinning out of control, at which point rescue options would be limited, McDowell said. So that was all about the fate of ISS. Comment down below if you wish to see a video about how to safely destroy or deorbit the ISS. Now, moving on to an interesting take on the successor to the space station that we found while digging through chunks of opinions and speculations by netizens. There's a lot of talk about who gets to claim certain prime crater positions for moon bases near the poles, where there's speculated to be water, ice, both shade and sunlight, and more constant hours of sun. However, it really seems like a waste of resources to plan out separate bases and some unnecessary risk. The craters in question are massive, far more space than what any individual country to make use, even with decades of substantial development, and means that individual countries will require development and construction of complete individual infrastructure to operate. The ISS has had to deal with limited space crew members, modules, experiments, etc. But a shared moon base doesn't really have the same concerns, given it can expand out as required, so long as infrastructure covers said expansion, power, water, oxygen, etc. It would allow countries with smaller space agencies and private industries to work on specific modules: food, habitation, power, construction, mining, speeding up the process of creating permanent habitability on the moon. And the hub of the Moonbase, belonging to several nations, would easily allow countries to deal with any critical failure, for example, life support failure. Just suit up and walk over to the neighboring base, 50 to 100 meters away. It seems like at this early stage of creating moon bases, countries would be better off working together on a shared moon base or a moon base hub in order to make a successful and large effort to build a central hub, and then there make their own smaller research stations further out, gradually colonizing more of the moon. Luckily, we think NASA likes more of this idea's general idea. Let us explain. The Artemis program, led by the US, has participation from around the globe. Europe is providing Orion's service module along with some modules for Gateway, and Japan announced a rover for lunar surface operations. This is alongside the Artemis Accords that has a dozen signatory countries. Now, the real exceptions are China and Russia, which have announced more or less a joint moon exploration mission of their own. Russia and China are the only countries that can feasibly set up their own separate moon base due to their large budget and internal cooperation, which so far aren't doing so in any cooperative effort with the US, creating issues with competition on location, no sharing of infrastructure, etc. So why doesn't NASA and China just make up and shake hands like nothing ever happened? NASA cannot work with China even if they wish to. There's a US law currently in act preventing that, the Wolf Amendment. It's a law passed by the United States Congress in 2011 that prohibits NASA from using government funds to engage in direct bilateral cooperation with the Chinese government and Chinese-affiliated organizations from its activities without explicit authorization from the FBI and the US Congress. But on the other hand, we have people who believe that having US, EU, Japan versus Russia, China on the other side will actually be beneficial for getting anything done. The space race has spurred immense developments through competition, since that competition has fallen away since the fall of the Soviet Union. Things take forever to get done, and there is no real motivation to push any harder than hard. For example, look at how long the ISS took to get underway and what NASA has achieved in human space exploration outside of that since the early 70s. Every step forward that China takes independently is great news, especially if it spurs the US into more action. What is your take on the situation? Is it alarming, or does it sound like a good competition? Also, let us know if you'd like to watch a video on how the ISS may or can be safely destroyed or disorbited. Liking and subscribing will significantly improve the quality of future videos. Thank you all for joining The Dash.